In our third and final video on nurturing friendships and connection, I'd like to speak a little bit about what it looks like to build a child's capacity to connect with others. So we've talked about friendship with the parent. We've talked about friendship with their peers. And I'd like to spend a few minutes sort of thinking about what does it look like to just kind of understand the nature of connection and the way that that plays out with people in their lives more broadly. So a few kind of fundamental ideas about this. I referenced this in the first video because that passage in John 15 where Jesus says he calls us friends. This is really, I think, a passage with your younger children to be able to talk through. What does it mean to them that Jesus refers to them as friends? What does it mean to them that Jesus invites them into the work of God, into the redemption of creation? What does that mean to your child that's at an age-appropriate level? And so that they can begin to think about Jesus as their friend, God as their friend, and maybe less frightening way to think about God as well. Friendship includes really what I think of as a unique form of intimacy and trust that you as a parent have this great responsibility to develop. And the way we do that, or at least the way we hope to do that, is that we hope to build safety, we hope to build space so that the child can bring to us the things that they're feeling or thinking, the things that they're worried about, the things that they're mad at us about. All of these things have a momentum that sort of move them towards the capacity to develop what this famous developmental psychologist would call basic trust. In other words, is the world basically a safe place to be in, or is the world an unsafe place to be in? And you as their parent create the foundation for that, which is going to have long-term implications in their kind of freedom and capacity to develop relationships with other people down the road. You don't have to be perfect, by the way, right? None of us are perfect in this. In fact, there's a famous child psychiatrist named Donald Winnicott who talks about this notion of being a good enough parent. And what he found is that we really only have to be on about 30% of the time to be good enough. In other words, we don't have to get this right all the time. We just have to get it right some of the time. And if we get it right some of the time, that's enough for most of our kids. Another thing that I find that really helps develop the child's sort of capacity to nurture relationships and friendships is the degree to which the two parents are nurturing connection and friendship with each other as well. This can be complex. I do a lot of marriage counseling. I know relationships are kind of all over the place in terms of high conflict to kind of nurturing or even detached. And so I understand that this is sort of a mixed scenario for you, but what I would encourage you to think about is what does it look like to, as much as I can, as much as I have the opportunity to make sure that I'm attending to the friendship need of the relationship with my child's other parent. For some of you, you may be divorced, right? Which creates a whole nother level of tension. However, what I find for most children is the more peaceful and the more friendly, even if sometimes if you're faking it, frankly, the more friendly the relationship is between the two parents who are in a divorce situation, the safer it feels for the child. And you want that child to feel that safety because that safety is the kind of the building block that allows them to kind of develop connections and friendships outside of the relationship with you. Some questions that you may want to ask your children relative to this is what they need from you now, right? What do they need from you in the midst of the COVID situation? What do they need from you outside of the COVID situation? This will pass, right? This is a time and place where we are all kind of struggling with this, but eventually this will pass. And my hope for you is that you kind of use this time to develop a deeper connection with your children so that when it does pass, you have some great groundwork that you can use moving into the future. Another question that I find in the midst of this in terms of developing connection is what are their fears? For kids who are maybe mid-childhood and they're already kind of understanding technology and whatnot, I find that a lot of kids are just feeling like they're missing out on everything, right? They're missing out on not just connection, but they see other kids that are connecting in other ways, and they just feel like they're alone and they're missing out. That fear's there. I find for a lot of kids, in the midst of their fears, they're feeling depressed. In fact, all of the data would suggest at about a 75 to 85% rate that people are struggling with anxiety or also struggling with depression. So if your kids are feeling kind of frightened, what you're going to notice is they may feel kind of down too. This doesn't necessarily have to be a clinical level of feeling kind of depressive or feeling anxious, but if one's there, the likelihood is that the other one may be there as well. So pay attention to that. Ask about that. Ask about their uncertainty, right? Ask about whether this feels like a disorienting time for them, depending on, again, their age and whatnot. But maybe once you pause the video and think about kind of within yourself or with the group members that you're with, what are the kinds of fears or relational stressors that your child or teen might be experiencing? And maybe think about what are some ways that you all might attend to those fears or those stressors. Okay. And then the last couple of points. The first one is this idea of, I want you to kind of think about being more mindful at working at being generous of spirit. In other words, what I'm encouraging you to do is to think about what would relational generosity look like relative to your children, and how might you help them grow that in other people. One of the real stumbling blocks I find to this idea of kind of relational generosity or kind of connective generosity is that a lot of times we take things too personally, right? We take things too personally from our children, we take things too personally from our spouse, we take things too personally from others. And the reality is, most of us are so kind of caught up in our own experiences that most of the time they're not really meaning that toward us. In fact, there's a famous social psychological kind of construct called Fisher's Rule. And Fisher's Rule says that when we're interacting with someone else, we think about 90% of the way that they're interacting with us has to do with us. Well, the reality is only about 10% of the way that they're interacting with us has to do with us. And most of it has to do with what's going on within them. That's true with your children as well. That's true with your friends and your spouse. And so this generosity of spirit, I think, oftentimes looks like giving people the benefit of the doubt. Giving your children the benefit of the doubt, teaching them how to give their friends the benefit of the doubt when they don't respond to a text or when they don't respond to a voicemail, whatever that looks like, and kind of helping them hold that in a different way, that they're human too, they make mistakes too. And that is, I think, a foundational piece, again, of what does it look like to maintain friendships long term, because boy, we all let people down at times. And then the last one, again, is this idea that empathy is healing. Empathy with an other, in the end, is a healing experience. I have to really work at this with my students, because a lot of times they'll ask me, well, Dr. Van Lant, why do we spend so much time kind of developing just the capacity to listen to others well? And it's really because what we find from the neuroscience research is that when we listen to someone empathically, it actually has a healing effect upon the person's experiences, both neurologically and relationally. And so my encouragement, probably my last encouragement to you, would be, if you're not naturally empathic, work at that. If you are naturally empathic, make space for that, and find out where your kids really are, where they need you in the context of their friendships with you, with others, with peers, with God. And in the end, I think this will really pay a lot of dividend.